Hello and welcome to another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop. And this time round, there's been a car that's created quite a lot of interest, actually, the Ferrari 412. It's been in for some work, it's now finished, all bar the shouting, and it's what I would call a cash and carry job, this. So we have our major restoration projects, which take months and years and cost a lot of money, although we do pride ourselves on being competitive, having said that. And the cars that come in for 2 or 3 faults, which we rectify and get back on the road. And in fact, the owner's coming to collect this car in 2 hours, so perfect timing, really. The 412 is quite a sort of overlooked and underrated Ferrari. Mechanically, the engine is essentially a detuned Daytona engine, which is not too shabby. We had a problem. The car would not pull the skin off a rice pudding. It had no power, and it was actually dangerous in traffic because you couldn't accelerate your way out of even a car coming up behind you. The brakes were also quite heavy on it. The servo wasn't working to full capacity, and the rear suspension was incredibly bouncy over bumps. It was like having no suspension whatsoever. So we've worked our way through, and we've addressed the rear suspension system. It has essentially, Ferrari moved from the 400 to the 412, just to get technical for a moment. The rear suspension on the 400, because it's a grand touring car, and because the back end, the boot was designed to take quite a lot of luggage, actually, for a car of this type. It was a genuine 2+2 plus luggage. And because of that, the rear suspension had variable loads. If the car was fully laden, it would be quite a lot of weight on the back end. So the earlier cars, up to the end of the 400s, I think, Ferrari 400s, had self-leveling, Korrey self-leveling units, which were a very clever system, where the road bumps actually pumped the suspension back up to the ride height again. It used the energy from the bumps to self-level the car with all the luggage and weight in it. Very clever. For whatever reason, I suspect Korrey didn't consider it viable to make them anymore. They had to ditch that on the 412, and they came up with a Citroën type rear suspension that was used on Mercedes 6.9s, Rolls-Royce Silver Shadows, and particularly the Spirit generation, and these. And it's basically, you've got a sister spring so that the car doesn't look terrible and go right down on the back end when you leave it and the system depressurizes. But the damping and ride height control was actually governed by a height control valve, which used mineral type oil to self-level the car. And you have spheres on either side, pressurized with nitrogen to act as dampers, and the fluid in the rear pistons, essentially in the rear suspension, displaces into these spheres which are mounted nearby, and that's how you get the shock absorber and springing. It's quite a complicated system, almost identical to the back end of a Rolls-Royce Silver Spirit. That's how I can best describe it. Doesn't really help in the description, but it's quite complicated to try and describe verbally. Anyway, net result is we have got hold of some spheres which are of the correct pressure, etc., correct type, but we can't weld any bracketry to them because they've got a butyl rubber diaphragm inside with nitrogen, and if you weld that, it has to be red hot to weld. You will destroy the diaphragm and all the nitrogen. You'll fit them and you'll be back to square one. So we've had to be very creative. Korrey has made some brackets up, some beautiful work to actually hold the spheres that we've got hold of on the rear suspension. Well, this is this is a classic area where we have to improvise because we just can't get parts anymore. And what Ferrari did, either Boge stopped making them or whatever, when they went on to the 412, you've got these 2 piston and damper units, but they are only a piston and cylinder. And what happens is they direct the fluid, the self-leveling rear suspension fluid, which is controlled by, this is sort of like the Citroën system, basically. So you've got these, even though it's got springs on, these are not shock absorbers. They are simply fluid transfer pistons and cylinders. And what happens is the fluid gets transmitted, and here we have the original Korrey suspension unit, and this is it's got a butyl diaphragm inside, rubber diaphragm, and this is pumped up at the bottom here to 28 bar, or about 430 pounds per square inch. So the diaphragm is all the way up there in this one, and what happens is the road bumps actually displace the fluid in and out of here, and the diaphragm filled with nitrogen acts as the shock absorber. That's how it works. It's very clever. This is the same system I explained on the Citroen CX many videos ago. The diameter of the hole in there determines the dampening effect of this unit. Fiendishly simple, fiendishly clever. So if you want hard suspension, you dial in a small diameter hole so the fluid can't move through it as quickly. If you want softer suspension, you dial in a larger hole so that the more fluid can come in and out. Dead easy, but very fiendishly clever. So the problem now is, he says, introducing Korrey.
Hello.
We've been hit with the problem that we can't get these spheres anymore.
No, they're not available from Korrey or anywhere else, or Ferrari, no.
Yeah. So what we've done is we've taken a 28 bar sphere off a model of Mercedes, and this is experimentation because we don't know how big the hole is in that.
No, we don't.
But what you've done is, this is the original here with the mounting bracket, the hydraulic pipes from each unit bolt into that.
Yeah.
And you actually made this rather beautiful bracket up, because the thing is we cannot weld a bracket onto these, otherwise we'll ruin the diaphragm inside.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've made this beautiful bracket up here, which will replace that.
Yeah.
And we've also managed to get an adapter to take the thread size down to this size as well.
Yes.
So you've made this up, haven't you?
Yeah, I've had to make it up because with this new diaphragm, the way the bracketry is on it is completely different to the original, and there's not a lot of room to play with once you're actually in there to mount the sphere, and so now we've got the adapter on as well. You've got to take into account it needs to come down a little bit to allow for that, because there's not very much movement on the pipes that are in there, especially the rigid one at the top. And I've also got to offset it enough that it doesn't catch the body, but it also doesn't hang too low and catch the exhaust, which it can do up there.
Right.
So it's taken me quite a while today to fabricate it all, measure it all up, and just try and work out exactly where it needs to sit. But yeah, this is more or less the finished product. It just needs priming and painting properly now.
Well, it looks wonderful. You've made it's a work of art. It's a shame it's going to be stuck under the car.
I know, getting covered in all sorts of road grime. But and the only other thing was we had to get this adapter, like you said, because the thread in this unit is an M16 in here, and it needed to be taken down to an M10 thread, like the original sphere.
Yep.
Because that bolt is threaded at the end, and several of the pipe unions slide over it, and then it will thread.
Right, that's a very special bolt then. Basically.
It is, and there's an O-ring at the top there as well, Doughty seals down here, so there's quite a lot going on with it, and then in the top of that you've got the rigid line finally to cap it off. So there's a lot to take into account that when trying to offer this up, it doesn't just drop in. So,
yeah. No, that's great.
Yeah.
And this is trial and error. This is educated trial and error. This is experienced trial and error. But it is trial and error because we don't know what the dampening effect on the back of the car. From our first road test, it was very bouncy. The diaphragms had completely lost their pressure, so there was no spring effect. It was just bouncing off solid fluid in here. So we don't know what this is going to be like, but we're giving it a very good shot. And we'll see if it works or not.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
But that's beautiful work, Korrey.
Thank you very much.
Beautiful. The whole thing should drive beautifully now. It really should be very smooth on the road, as it was from the factory. The fuel injection system, there are 2 fuel tanks interconnected at the back end, either side of the boot again, underneath the luggage area, and they have a whole pump assembly which is about this size, which is immersed in the tank, and having checked all the pressures, I've done a lot of diagnosis work around the fuel injection system. They are not interconnected, but they are. Again, it's complicated. You have got a pipe that connects the two fuel injection systems, but the right-hand bank was suffering from low injection pressure. So I've got my Cagetronic diagnosis hat on, and we found what the problem was. It was a feed pressure problem in the pump, in the boot. So we took that out and had a look. The pump was indeed defective. We've done a couple of other things in there. The other thing it wasn't doing was hot starting. It is warm at the moment. And there we have it. Beautiful. So it wasn't doing that. This is a problem on Cagetronic systems, actually. If you leave them for 20, 25, 30 minutes hot, they can be almost impossible to restart. And there is a particular thing on the Cagetronic system which I'm not going to share, because we have to have our little moments of intellectual property, and this is one of them. Anyway, it's fixed, and as I say, the owner's coming to pick it up. Please forgive me for being a bit churlish, but we're not going to give away everything. We still have to have some trade secrets up our sleeve, but suffice to say, the whole car is starting and running beautifully. This injection system has come back to life. I've nursed it back to life, adjusted the mixture, the CO, etc. And the engine shows all the indications of being as fruity as it should be on the road. And the brakes, because of we've had a look at the servo, the one-way check valve wasn't quite seating properly. There were some issues with the vacuum servo side of the braking system. That's all taken care of. The brakes were actually quite glazed over as well. The pads weren't biting into the disc quite as much as they should do, because the car's been driven gently, because it was producing probably 30% of the power it should be. So the whole thing becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy and a cross-pollinization, mixing my metaphors horrendously, for problems that feed one into the other. So we've had to unpick all those problems. I'm looking forward to giving this car a run, because I reckon it's going to be pretty good now, and very satisfying. So let's take the car on the road. Well, there is something extremely satisfying about bringing an errant Ferrari back to life, and that is exactly what we've done. It was virtually undrivable. It was a road hazard for two reasons. First of all, the back suspension was bouncing all over the place like a bouncy castle on steroids, and secondly, it didn't have enough power to pull the skin off a rice pudding, as they used to say. And I'm pleased to say, immediately the suspension, following all that work on the back end, it suffered with the same affliction as Citroëns can do and Mercedes 6.9s. The spheres in the suspension had lost their compensating pressure, and consequently there was no damping, there was no spring in the suspension whatsoever, and it has been beautifully eradicated. It's just right. The car rides over these bumps very well. There's no comparison. Before I was jumping around like this. Now it's very smooth, actually. No body roll. This is a phenomenal result, considering we didn't have the exact original parts to play with. We've had to adapt them. Just wonderful. And the engine is, I can tell already, the engine is pulling far better than it has done for a while, actually, following that fuel pump problem. I'm just letting the car pull through, but I mean, I can tell immediately. It's just driving. It's amazing, particularly with a V12. I've found that sometimes, I'm trying to find the window switch. Where have you gone? There it is. With the V12 in particular, if it's not on song, it affects the whole car very badly. I know that can be true of any internal combustion engine, but it seems particularly so with the V12, that if there is a cylinder or two down, it makes a big difference to the way the car goes and sounds and feels. And that's what we've got here. But it's just, this car is back to its former glory. It really is. So I'm just warming it through, and then we'll see what happens. And on our now well-known test track here, the council have been out putting the road right. Yes! So we have a better test track. It's smoother. Yes, they've patched it up, but they've used proper patches as opposed to lots of improper patches, small, and it's great. The test track, we're still able to test the suspension, but not without causing great pain to a car's suspension system. So I'm going to slow down now and just see what the engine response is like. I already know, really, but here we go. Okay, we're down in first gear now. There we go. Oh yes, that is amazing. Compared to what it was like, it is night and day. It really is. I mean, the car, it goes where you point it. It's riding the bumps well, but also it answers to the command. It really does. Here we go again, 3,000 RPM, and this car would not pull. It was dangerous because it had no power. It would hardly keep up with traffic. Here we go. There you go. Lovely. Just fantastic. It sounds actually quite similar to how it was, but the difference in performance, because it's running on 12 cylinders, not 6, it's suddenly come into a high-performance car again. Of its era, this was a very fast four-seater, 150 plus miles an hour, which, in fact, I think it was up to 160 in the 412. A world of difference, really. Wow. Just amazing. All those injectors, those 12 injectors, those twin injection systems, all the pumps, all the accumulators, everything, all the valves in the fuel system. It's just great. It's wonderful when we can do this and things come together so well. It really is. Yeah, a good day in the office, this. Very, very happy. The owner of this is going to be absolutely delighted, as I am. So we've ascertained that the throttle's open all the way, which is something I never take for granted. I've made sure that the throttle linkage actually opens the throttles wide. Let's just try the kick down, see if that's working now too. The kick down is sort of torque related, and partly due to a kick down valve in this transmission, the General Motors Turbo Hydromatic. There's all sorts of things you can do with these automatic gearboxes now. You can change the valve body for one that's more immediate, less slushy between gear changes, but provided it's all working okay, it sort of suits the demeanour of the car, this transmission. It's smooth. So let's try the passing gear, or kick down, as the Americans call it, just when we get on a bit of a straight. That's the final ingredient in the pie. Here we go. Yeah, it is working, but not as fantastically as I'd like. But that is probably the way they are. Jaguar V12s with the same automatic transmission do the same. So I'd like to look into that and see if we can refine that. We can always move it down manually, like that. But yeah, I'm going to try it on the straight at higher speeds actually, because I have noticed in Jaguar XJS's and V12 Jaguars I've driven over the years, it is reluctant to kick down into first gear. So we'll just try it. We'll get it on the straight and and see how it is into second. It could just be, I think it's a characteristic, easy for me to say, of the automatic gearbox. Oh, it's so smooth, this car now. It is a world apart from how it was. It really is. So once we get on the straight, I'll just take it up a bit on speed, nothing crazy, and then we'll see if it kicks down to second from third. Okay, that's in third gear now. I'll just take it down a bit. No. Okay, we're going to have to do a little bit of work around that. I can just flick the lever, but it should be doing it anyway. That. And it isn't. So, just a little bit of fine-tuning to be done on the kickdown on the automatic transmission. We can do that. We have the technology. But I'm so happy this car has turned out beautifully. It's yeah, I have confidence in this car, and I think the owner will have too, that he can do trips in this, and it's actually going to get him from A to B rather beautifully. Well, that concludes another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop video. Hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll be back with something else very soon.